Mikel Arteta speaks to the media this morning at 9:30. We'll hear from him live. Will they sign a striker as reports emerge that Gabriel Jesus has torn his ACL? And we'll also hear from Eddie Howe. That's coming up a little bit later for you this morning. A very good morning to you at home and, of course, to James Savundra, Dan Bardell and Dave Reed. Now, Chelsea could be busy in this transfer window. They've contacted Bayern Munich to ask about the availability of Mathys Tell. Now, they could also be active in terms of outgoings as well. Ben Chilwell is surplus to requirements, while both Carney, Chukwuemeka and Renato Vega could also leave. I mean, Dave, just first up, Mathys Tell. Just first of all, what can you tell us about this Chelsea target?
Well, I think what we first of all can tell you about Chelsea is that their priority has been to target the best young players around the world. So this is a player that Julian Nagelsmann as well said was capable of scoring 40 goals a season in the future, a little bit like Robert Lewandowski. And at 19 years old, he is seen as one of the best talents coming through into the Bayern Munich team. At 6 foot, he has got the physical presence to play as a central striker. Key for him, though, is that he's also lean and mobile with good pace. It means most of his opportunities have come from the left-hand side. He actually started out life in his youth career as a centre-back, but he began moving up the pitch once he signed for Rennes. At 17, he became Bayern Munich's youngest ever scorer in August 2022, beating the previous record holder, Jamal Musiala. Whatever happened to him? And look at how highly he is regarded as well against his peers, because last year he was nominated in the final shortlist for the Golden Boy Award. That's for the best under-21 players in Europe. Now, Tell signed a new contract last year, but the issue for him is game time. Last season, he was a consistent performer from the bench under Thomas Tuchel. This season, his chances have been limited. Harry Kane is a lock up front, with Coman, Gnabry and Zane competing for wide positions. It means he's only made 12 appearances this season in all competitions, just 2 league starts this season. If Tell were to leave Bayern, they are interested in Chelsea's Christopher Nkunku as a replacement. You might think that perhaps he's a bit frustrated with his game time this season, Nkunku.
Yeah, pretty much limited to just Europa Conference League football. And I think when you're a player and you're given your opportunity, which obviously Nkunku's been given in the Conference League, when you've done all you can, but you probably still know you're not going to play in the Premier League because of the way Chelsea seem to have like an A team and a B team, it must be really, really frustrating. I think in a parallel universe, I think Nkunku would have turned out to be a good buy for Chelsea, but I think getting that really, really bad injury in pre-season, his first pre-season, that really set him back. I think there were games that Olivia will remember where he looked electric in that pre-season, and he was
him
probably
and Jackson together,
yeah,
brilliant.
He genuinely would have been the signing probably that Chelsea fans were most excited about, and then they didn't really see him last season. And then this season, again, it's just been really, really tough for him to get in that side ahead of Nicholas Jackson in the Premier League. And we are where we are now. And he's a player who's done well in the Bundesliga previously. I can completely see why Bayern Munich would be interested in him. Him and Tell obviously would work as separate deals, but you would think that Nkunku going to Bayern would work really well for them, type of player that they're looking for. And Tell being a lot younger than Nkunku, that's the market that Chelsea operate in, isn't it? So it could be a move that suits both parties.
Yeah, what I would say about Christopher Nkunku as well is that I don't think he is a number 9, but at Chelsea, he's almost played in that number 9 because they have Cole Palmer and Joao Felix as their 2 number 10s. But you maybe think off Harry Kane, that would almost be the perfect position for Christopher Nkunku. James, are you surprised in terms of outgoings for Chelsea? 2 names that I mentioned were Ben Chilwell, who has been told he's surplus to requirements. We've seen that this season, and also Renato Vega. And if they both go, that would just leave one centre-back one left-back, Marc Cucurella. Are you surprised by that?
Well, I think they're both very different cases. With Ben Chilwell, Enzo Maresca's been clear throughout. Actually, he's been really honest with the player as well, that he doesn't fit into what he wants from a fullback. Now, he spoke about it again yesterday, saying he doesn't want up and down fullbacks. He says Ben Chilwell could win things for England and he could win major competitions for another side, but it's not going to be with Chelsea because his style of football doesn't fit in with what Enzo Maresca wants from his left-back and his fullbacks. One thing he said yesterday as well, he said that Reece James can play everywhere, which suggests that Reece James, when he comes back and is fully fit, could play at left-back. We saw Malagusto play as a left-back at times before. I don't think you really want to play Levi Colwill there at left-back, but he's done that as well. So you can understand with Chilwell, doesn't fit into the system, so he's a player that needs to go. But for Vega, it's slightly different because from a business point of view, this would really make sense for Chelsea. I don't think they were looking to let him go in this window, but they signed him for around £11 million. It looks like they could make a significant profit on him in the space of just a few months. So I think, yes, it would leave them slightly short, but Chelsea still have options in that area. And I think if you can get real money for Vega, who isn't going to get a serious number of first team minutes in the Premier League, which is what he wants, and it makes sense to offload him now.
Yeah. Well, we've got some breaking news, and that is that Arsenal striker Gabriel Jesus has suffered a suspected injury to his ACL. Now, as we said earlier, we are going to be speaking to Mikel Arteta. We're going to have him live. His news conference is at 9:30 this morning, so we'll hopefully get a little bit more from him. But that is the news. Arsenal striker Gabriel Jesus has suffered a suspected injury to his ACL. We've seen ACL injuries before. Likely he'll be out for the rest of the season and a little bit more. I mean, Dan, just first of all, how much of a blow is this to Arsenal?
First off, for the player, it felt like he'd got some rhythm recently. He got himself into the team, scored a few goals, and he got kind of his mojo back that we hadn't really seen there throughout his whole time at Arsenal, other than maybe the first few months. For Arsenal, I mean, losing anyone at the moment is a huge blow for them because they seem stretched, particularly in the forward areas. Obviously, we all know that Saka's going to be out for another 6 weeks or so. He's got a long-term injury. To lose Jesus at this point, in some ways for Arsenal, they've got time now. They've got a few weeks to maybe look at getting a replacement in. But one, we know how hard January is. Two, we know how hard PSR restrictions are. And three, just finding that right type of player, finding that forward that's available without paying over the odds. Will Arsenal look back and think maybe we should have done more in the summer? I think it's easy to look at it like that with hindsight. But one thing's for certain now, I think they'll definitely need to bolster the attacking options in January.
I mean, Dave, bolster the attacking options in January, but we know from the summer that Arsenal won't go out and get someone unless Arteta thinks they are the perfect fit for his squad. But are they becoming a little bit more desperate now in January? Now this has happened, they've only got really Kai Havertz.
Yeah, you feel like you only act in the January transfer window if you're almost in a crisis, or you're at the other end of the scale where a market opportunity becomes available that you were going to do in the summer and it's now happy to do. And if you're kind of at the both ends of the scale, it feels like Arsenal's forward options are more towards the crisis end of the scale than the other end of the scale. And now I'm not saying that Arsenal are at a crisis point at all. What I would say, though, is that Arsenal have been looking for a striker for a couple of windows now. They were heavily interested in Benjamin Sesko. They looked at Ivan Toney. So it's not like Arsenal aren't doing their homework on potential strikers to bring in. Now it's a case of, are they able to do a deal early that they were going to think about doing in the summer? Can they do that now? Or do they potentially look at a loan deal as well? I think their two domestic loans slots are filled. So it would be a loan from around Europe. And that's a question now for Mikel Arteta to assess. What would a loan player coming in do to the balance of his squad? The young players coming through for pathways, their fight for the title, their fight for Champions League. So there's a lot of things to assess, and it's not as simple as, oh, well, let's go out there and find who's available and get them in. I think there's a lot of other things you need to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Remember that Mikel Arteta's news conference is at 9:30, so I'll hope to get a little bit more from him then. But let's get to our transfer to keep an eye on in our one to watch. And that player today is Nottingham Forest forward Taiwo Awoniyi. Now, James, who wants him and what would he add to any team that he could potentially go to?
Well, West Ham are the team that are interested in signing him in this window. There's not been an official offer that's gone in yet, but Graham Potter spoke yesterday at his press conference and he told our reporter Jeremy Langdon that it's logical that they need to bring in a striker because of the injuries they've got in that area. Jared Bowen's still out. Nicholas Fulkrug could be out for a few months now. Somerville has got a bit of an injury. We know Antonio is very unlikely to play football again this season. So there's a real need, you'd think, in that area of the pitch. And whilst Potter was unwilling to speak about specific targets, this would make a lot of sense because Awoniyi really has suffered in terms of his minutes this season. He was brilliant 2 seasons ago. He scored goals at the back end of Forest's first season back in the Premier League, which kept them in the top flight. Because Chris Wood has been so good, that partnership between Chris Wood and Nuno Espirito Santo, the number of goals Chris Wood has scored for him has been remarkable. It's meant that he's not really got any opportunities whatsoever. He's just had 2 Premier League starts this season. But he was impressive 2 seasons ago for Nottingham Forest. He's still at a period in his career where he's got plenty to offer. You would wonder, though, because the fact he has played 13 times off the bench for Forest this season, that you'd think Forest would probably be unwilling to let him go unless they had a replacement in mind. I know they've got Emmanuel Dennis there, but it doesn't look like he's in favour at all. So I think this really makes sense for West Ham right now to bring in a player like that because Graham Potter did struggle for goals at the start of his tenure at Brighton and at Chelsea. They're averaging around a goal a game in the Premier League, and that's one of the main reasons why he was moved on. So he needs to find those forward options to give him a good chance of a decent start to life at West Ham.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right, now to developments at Manchester City then. They have reached an agreement in principle with Palmeiras for Vitor Rice. It's worth a fixed fee of £29.4 million. Final details of the deal are to be sorted this morning. He is the second centre-back set to move to the club this window after Abdulkadir Kushanov, who is due in the UK to complete a £33.5 million transfer from Lens. So a lot going on at Manchester City. I mean, Pep admitted that he perhaps should have done more in the summer. But one name we haven't mentioned is Omar Marmoush, James. What's the latest on that situation?
Well, the champions look like they could be the busiest side in the Premier League in this transfer window. It's remarkable the amount of business they're trying to do. It shows they really want to salvage what has been a really disappointing start to the season with some if he plays tonight, because his manager spoke yesterday, said he's going to start. But if these talks really do progress, then you'd think it'd be unlikely, with the transfer right on the brink of being completed, that he'd feature tonight in the Bundesliga.
I mean, Dan, does this feel like they finally replaced Julian Alvarez? They got a lot of money for him in the summer. Like Pep said, didn't maybe do the business they perhaps should have. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, I know. But is he the player to replace the Argentine?
Yeah, I think City at the time, I think they were looking at what they had within. I think there was probably a long-term plan to play Foden as a central number 10, and he struggled off the back of the Euros and definitely hasn't hit the heights of last season. Oscar Bob got injured on the eve of the season. I think Pep was putting a lot on him in pre-season, the way he was talking about him. I think he was going to come in to Manchester City's first team this season and make an impact. And then before you know it, Alvarez has ended up going and the window's shut. This is an exciting signing. This is a player that has lit up the Bundesliga all season. He's the second top scorer in the Bundesliga behind Harry Kane, 14 goals in 16 appearances. Can play all across the front line. Has got 7 assists as well. Takes free kicks. You know, he's got great technique, great pace, can come short, can get in behind. This is maybe a player that almost offers a little bit more variety than Alvarez. Alvarez was a really good player for Manchester City, but I can understand why they sold him, because it was an awful lot of money from Atletico to get him in. But this is a player that can replace him and more, in my opinion, and maybe not one we were looking at the start of the window, but someone that would really improve Manchester City and improve the attacking ranks. And he'd also take the load off Haaland a little bit. He's having to play every single game at the moment because there isn't another forward player at the club. This guy can come in and play as a centre forward if needs be as well.
Yeah, City are looking to bolster their attack as well as their defence. Now, Kyle Walker has obviously told Pep Guardiola he does want to leave. But when you look at their defensive options, Dave, do you feel like they actively need to go out in this window if he does leave and replace him straight away?
I think Pep Guardiola has said that he's confident in the players that are within his squad that can fill a hole should Kyle Walker leave the club during this January transfer window. I don't think that is a given by any stretch of the imagination. I'm interested to think about where Manchester City go from here, because Kyle Walker, no doubt, has been one of the best right-backs in Premier League history. And for him and his profile, it feels like he's more of a traditional right-back, one of those right-backs that overlaps and historically has got to the byline and crossed the ball in. Now, lots of chat about Kyle Walker not crossing the ball, so I'll leave that one there. But when you look at the profile that City go for next, do they go for a right-back like Kyle Walker in that traditional profile? Do they go for a right-back that can play centre-back, a more physical presence who can tuck inside and when they want to build in a 3 can do that? Or do they go for a right back that can invert and play in central midfield? Now, Rico Lewis has been one of the players that has done that and performed to a high level. Does Pep Guardiola believe that he's capable of being the main man essentially at right back and making that slot his own, and perhaps then he might think that he might not need a starter coming in, that he believes in Rico Lewis to fill that gap. So, but I'm interested to see where City go next on that.
Just quickly, I think it's worth noting that Manchester City had an unexpected fullback departure a few Januaries ago in Cancelo, and if Pep manager come out and come up with a system that offset that, be interesting to see whether he can do that again, because Rico Lewis has played a lot of football, but you've never got the feeling that he is the main man and that they've always had Kyle Walker as a full-back on. I think if Walker actually goes, it'll force Man City into a bit of a rethink in their defensive ranks, a little bit like it did when Cancelo left.
Yeah, well, will Kyle Walker still be a Manchester City player come the end of the window? We shall see. Right, still to come, we've got Mikel Arteta live at 9:30 and we'll hear from David Moyes as he gets to work at Everton. Can they sign elite players? Welcome back. Time now for our transfer update. Chelsea have contacted Bayern Munich to ask about the availability of Mathys. Borussia Dortmund have opened talks with Chelsea over loan deals for both Carney Chukwuemeka and Renato Vega. Manchester City are progressing in talks with Eintracht Frankfurt for forward Omar Marmoush. Manchester United are expecting to receive a formal approach from AC Milan for Marcus Rashford. Aston Villa have reached an agreement with Borussia Dortmund for forward Donyell Malen, worth just over £20 million. Romain Esse was absent from Millwall's squad for last night's FA Cup third-round tie against Dagenham and Redbridge as he closes in on a move to Crystal Palace. Palmeiras president Leila Pereira has confirmed their interest in Fulham's Andreas Pereira and says she would like the deal to be resolved soon. And Leicester are closing in on the signing of Parma right-back Woyo Koulibaly.
To Everton, and yesterday, new boss David Moyes said the club must try and attract elite players ahead of moving into their new stadium. Let's remind you of what he had to say.
The stadium looks the business. It looks elite. So we need to start getting some elite players. We need to start looking at the level of the players that we can give everybody something to shout about when we move to the new stadium. If I can give the supporters something to shout about as well by bringing in some new players, it's probably the things which the managers do. I mean, it's never that easy, and it's probably even a little bit more difficult here because it's not been a great situation for a while. But overall, I hope we can all get together and find a way of spending a bit of money. But as you well know, we've still got a little bit of work to do to clear everything. So we need to be mindful of that as well.
He wants elite players then for the new stadium. Is that realistic in this window?
Well, it depends on your definition of elite players, I guess, but I would suggest that's going to be hard with Everton with their current financial circumstances and where they are in the table, and with it being January as well. I'm intrigued by everything around this David Moyes going back. If you're a bit of a football geek like me, you always get excited when someone goes back to their old club, but actually seldom does it work out. But I actually think at this point, this is the best appointment that Everton could make. There's no doubt they're in a little bit of trouble, but I think with Moyes coming in, there's no way that they go down. And I think, to be honest, that's what they need with the big move into the new stadium. But January is going to be difficult with the financial constraints. You kind of get the impression from the noise around Everton that if they're to bring someone in, someone has to go out. You'd already say that squad isn't strong enough. But I think what Moyes will do is he'll look at that base that he's got. He'll look at the goalkeeper. He'll look at the two centre-backs, two defensive midfielders as well that he can put into the team. They've got a few people that can play there. And probably Calvert-Lewin leading the line. I think I've got a solid base there. But what I'll need to do is to get the other attacking players driving so that Calvert-Lewin can score goals. So the wide players and the number 10, just get them playing, get a bit of creativity back into the Everton ranks because they don't concede many goals. The problem has been putting the ball in the back of the net, and it's not something that's going to just be fixed overnight. They will need to get someone in, I suspect. So going to be an interesting last few weeks of the window for Everton.
Yeah, so what is a success for Everton in this transfer window and for David Moyes?
Well, it's going to be a struggle to bring in those elite players that David Moyes wants to see playing in an elite stadium next season. And he'll be hoping, Everton fans will be hoping, that'll be in the Premier League. Now, there's still work to be done. I think that Everton probably still would have stayed up with Sean Dyche in charge. With David Moyes, they've got a really good chance as well. I think when you look at where they've been this season, defensively they've been really solid, as Dan said. They've got a brilliant goalkeeper, they've got 2 or 3 really highly ranked centre-backs, and with Mikalenko and Ashley Young, they've got a really solid base there. Midfield's OK, but it is just finding those goals. The lack of goals is what ultimately did for Sean Dyche, despite the fact they got really good points against top sides in the Premier League. It is those lack of goals, which is quite incredible how lacking they've been in front of goal. They've got 4 strikers already, so I don't think they can really look at bringing in a striker. But it's that right flank where they need somebody to try and unlock the attacking weapons, which they do have. They've got Lindstrom and they've got Jack Harrison. Their loan spell comes to an end at the end of the season. And actually for Everton, a number of players are out of contract at the end of the season. So already they'll be thinking about next season and beyond. But in terms of signing players in this window, those can add immediate value. Moyes had a brilliant track record for recruitment everywhere he's been, but particularly at Everton. He'd love to find somebody like Seamus Coleman for £60,000, which he did all those years ago. The likes of Lescott, Jagielka. He brought in some brilliant players. He'll hope that he can use his contacts to get one through the door at least in this month.
Right, next we'll bring you the thoughts of Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta live as Gabriel Jesus suffers a suspected ACL injury. Welcome back. I just want to reiterate that breaking news, and that is that Gabriel Jesus has suffered a rupture to his ACL. We know what happens with ACL injuries. It looks like he is going to be out for at least the rest of the season. I mean, James, we spoke about it, we touched on it a little bit, but for Gabriel Jesus to have got back in the Arsenal side, to be playing well, scoring goals, timing is everything in football, and this just feels like such bad timing, not just for the player, but for the club as well. Yeah,
he looks in such brilliant form in those games against Crystal Palace. He looked like he could be that short-term fix for Arsenal. I think when Arsenal signed Zinchenko and Jesus 2.5 years ago now, it felt they could be the missing pieces in the jigsaw, and that title-winning experience would take Arsenal to the next level. Unfortunately, we've not seen that, but in recent weeks we have seen Jesus return to the sort of player that Arsenal thought they'd signed. But I think when you look at the last two matches, Arsenal failed to score from 23 attempts against Newcastle last week, 26 shots of goal ahead against Manchester United at the weekend. So when Jesus and Havertz have been in the team, they've not been scoring those chances. Arsenal do need a proven goal scorer now. I think they showed 2 seasons ago. We had Ødegaard, we had Martinelli and Saka all overperforming in terms of their XG, and they all each scored between 10 and 15 goals, and that got Arsenal so close to winning the title. But Martinelli and Ødegaard haven't shown that level of performance from an attacking point of view for the last 18 months when it comes to Martinelli. Ødegaard has been slightly different. He's sometimes laying on the assist before the assist. But I think they need somebody who's going to bury those chances now. It's simple as that. Somebody who scores 20 goals a season. The difficulty in January is there's not many of those around, and those that are around, it's going to cost a serious amount of money. Of course, Arsenal have lost Edu. They've got somebody acting as their sporting director now. They're recruiting for the sporting director. So that's playing a part as well. Clearly, Arsenal fans will feel that perhaps we've invested too heavily in goalkeepers, defenders and defensively minded midfielders rather than focusing on the attack, because ultimately it's been those same players that have been asked to go again the last 3 years for Arsenal.
Obviously with Saka's injury as well, Dan, how much pressure is now on that man Kai Havertz? Because it does feel like he's their only option now, and he's their only man that they can rely on sort of in that number 9.
Yeah, I mean, he's the only recognised number 9.
And
you could argue he's not number 9, couldn't you? So it's a difficult situation for him, a lot of pressure on his shoulders, a lot of pressure on Arteta and Arsenal now as well. You just wonder, what kind of striker is it that Arsenal are looking for? I wrote a list earlier of players that have either moved in the summer or could have moved in the summer. So Osimhen, Toney, John Duran, Solanke, Guirassy. You know, what Arsenal weren't in for any of those. Obviously, there was murmurs with Toney at times, but Arsenal weren't ever in for any of those strikers. What profile of striker is it that Arsenal are looking for? Because I genuinely do believe that if the right striker was out there and had been available in the last 2 or 3 windows, I think Arsenal would have backed Arteta and they'd have gone and got them. This is just my own personal feeling. I think Arteta hasn't found that striker available or that's gettable that he thinks suits the way Arsenal play. And you can talk about the way Arsenal have changed this season and maybe they're a bit slower, maybe they're a bit more predictable. But they've turned themselves into an elite team over the last few seasons, which then makes it harder to take that next step and sign that right centre forward. But I just wondered, who is that forward? Is it Isak, who obviously isn't available? Who is that striker that Arsenal
It's got to be Isak, hasn't it? But you look in this window, it would cost possibly as much as £150 million. Would Newcastle even let him go if a bid over £100 million came in this window? We know Newcastle have battled with PSR constraints, but in the form they're in right now, the form Isak's in right now, they're not going to let him go in this window. Potentially in the summer, as they look to try and comply with the rules once again, we know the rules are going to change next season. But he's the man Arsenal need. They need someone who's going to guarantee you 20 goals a season. He's so handy linking up play as well. He's such a brilliantly gifted player. Arsenal have tried loads of different ways of trying to score goals over the course of the last few seasons. At times it's worked. But at the moment, with Saka missing, you really do see how frail this side is from an attacking point of view. It feels like we're almost relying on the set pieces now for Arsenal to score those goals. And when they're not scoring from set pieces, from open play, you are struggling a little bit because even when they're getting the chances, they don't have that man there that's burying them.
Do you feel like Arsenal are going to panic? They didn't panic in the summer when everyone said they needed a striker and they didn't get one then. This sort of desperation, I should say, has probably gone up a little bit more with that injury. But do you see Arteta panicking at all?
No, I think they've been pretty sensible in terms of their spending over the last couple of years. And look, I think everyone loves a hot take, don't they, at the moment? But I think we just need to have a little step back and look at the realism of the situation. I mean, at the start of the season, Kai Havertz was the second coming. Do you know what I mean? And now it's been almost laid bare in a game in the FA Cup that the story is completely the opposite. So Arsenal are capable of scoring goals. They have had a bit of a rough patch, but they weren't that far away from Manchester City last season, 6 points. And I think everyone's been a little bit surprised at the uptick in Liverpool. I don't think anybody really expected them to be this good at this point in the season. So, do I think we just need to take a step back and have a bit of realism? Probably yes.
Well, Mikel Arteta is speaking to the media ahead of their Premier League game with Tottenham. It's a North London derby. Let's head to him now.
Described it on Sunday as a big worry. You know more now. What's the latest?
Yeah, we know more now, and it's not looking good at all. But we need to review one more specialist, so probably we'll have the total information this afternoon.
Because obviously the player himself and his people will know probably more than you do, or at least as much as you do, about what it is. And the reports emerging from within the camp that it might be an ACL problem. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I don't want to confirm anything again till we have the final report this afternoon, and I think it's the doctor's job to do that. But yeah, we were very worried straight away after the game, and we are very worried today.
So I don't want to be pessimist, but there's a chance it could be a season-ending injury.
Well, again, let's wait here this afternoon.
Any other players who've been injured who might be available for you tomorrow?
We have one more training session, and there are a few that can be close, but again, this afternoon we'll have the full info on the squad and who is available and who is not.
One of the ones who was nearest to being back, Calafiori, is he one of the ones who might be available?
Yeah, his thing is not too much, but again, we need another day or two. You playing every 3 days, and 24 hours become really important because they are not long-term injuries on that case, for example. So we'll have more understanding this afternoon.
Jorginho looked to be going off with a bit of discomfort, is he?
He was cramping, honestly. We played extra time. Jurrian was exactly the same, so we had a few players struggling to finish the game.
But he's fine?
He's fine, yeah.
Okay. Obviously, with this injury to Jesus, potentially quite serious, does that change your thinking about the transfer window? I think you're asked about bringing in an out-and-out striker more often than Tyson Fury announces he's going to retire from boxing, but can I ask you again?
Yeah. But my answer doesn't change. My answer remains the same. We are actively looking in the market to improve the squad. And that's been since day one. We will be naive not to do that because it's an opportunity always to evolve the team, to improve the squad, and especially with the circumstances that we have. So yes, we are looking and we are trying, and let's see what we are able to do.
Because you said, I think you said after the game, it might have been, you know, not what you meant, but you said it wasn't in your hands. What did you mean by that?
Well, you have to recruit a player. There are three parties, and you have to agree to that. And we have our limitations as well, like any other club. So we can do what we can do, and we plan our squad, and we have our limits to do what we want to do, and that's it. So the fact that I love a lot our players doesn't mean that we cannot think about improving. I'm not that stubborn, and we all want the same. That we use every opportunity to improve the squad daily, and when the market comes in, if we can do that to make sure that we have the best resources and the best capacities to compete in the manner that we want.
Let's talk on the pitch, because a big game, the North London derby.
Yeah.
In London derbies in 2024, I think you played 11, unbeaten in all of them. Keep that record going with a win, hopefully, tomorrow.
Yeah, probably the nicest game of the season to watch and to play, certainly, because of the atmosphere, because what it means to our people, what it means to us. Everybody is involved in the game, so this is something that is in our hands. For example, it's and let's create the best atmosphere that we have played at the Emirates. That's an objective. That's something that we control. Players, staff, and all the supporters that turn up tomorrow. So this is something that we can do. So let's do it.
Something you can't control, and I hesitate to mention it because we don't want to give these idiots the oxygen of publicity, but there's been some beyond the pale social media activity towards one of your players since Sunday. How sad is it that this happens in football, that it should be a sport that we all enjoy?
It's incredible, honestly, and we really have to do something about it, because accepting that and hiding this, I think has terrible consequences, and it's something that we really have to eradicate from the game, because it's so cynical as well, and it's so dependent to a result of an action, and there is not any other story like this. When we play Ipswich, it was 27. 27th of December at home. We win 1-0. Kai Havertz scores a goal, and the whole stadium after that is singing the Waka Waka. That's 20 days ago. Guys, what is the perspective? So we are all responsible, and all means you guys are responsible. Everybody is responsible for the narrative. Everybody is responsible for how we talk, and we cannot look somewhere else. That's a really serious matter, guys. And it affects him, and it affects me, it affects everybody that is in the industry in the way. And we can accept, and we say that's our job, yes, but there are certain limits, and the line has to be drawn. And we put a lot of attention on that about technology and what is next in football. The next in football might be that this is prohibited. It cannot happen. That's it. That's what we should aim for.
Well said, Mikel. Thank you. Good luck.
We'll go to Niv from the Premier League.
Hello.
You've been the Arsenal manager for 5 years. The amount of injuries you're dealing with this season, missing key players, is it the toughest to experience? And from your perspective, does it mean you try to be out there and be more creative with the style of play and trying to find solutions?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, it's the most challenging period that we had, especially because we lost very, very important players in crucial moments. But I don't know, things happen for a reason in this life. We have to adapt with everything that happened. Still, look how the team performs. Okay, we didn't win the other day, but you have to go in a competition. Let's go out like this when you've been infinitely better than the opposition again. And on Wednesday we have another one. Probably the best timing to play because we know what it means, that game, for all of us. So let's face it, the circumstances are what they are. Let's embrace them and let's get the best out of that, because even with all that, look how the team plays.
I remember previously when I've asked you about Ange Postecoglou, you mentioned you have big respect for him, for the style of play, for his sticking for his principle. I can imagine this respect is even bigger now because he's dealing with injuries as well. He's being very, still being resilient and try to find solution and try to be competitive as well.
That's our job, and it's very difficult to predict that those things are going to happen. But about how we react, again, this is something that is in our hands. You can feel sorry for yourself and start to find excuses, or face it. And I think Angie's done that. And last year, I think they have some difficulties as well. And he dealt in the same way. So I really respect that.
Until last week, you haven't lost.
That was Mikel Arteta talking, not giving too much away, but he says they are going to look to strengthen, if they can, in January. Right, we can get the latest on the future of Brighton's Evan Ferguson now. The 20-year-old striker has been linked with a loan move to West Ham. His manager, Fabian Hertzler, has been speaking to the media this morning.
He proved why he's here and playing for Brighton. He's a player that comes from the youth academy, and that's also the way from the club, and like I said, again, we will negotiate the same with Evan. What is important for him, what is important for his development, where can he improve the best, and then we will make a decision together.
Could it be tough to send him, if the decision is to send him on loan, could it be tough to send him to another Premier League club? Would it?
Yeah, I think this decision is should be chosen what's the best for the player and for the club. And in the end, we had sent Buonanotte, for example, to Leicester, and we know that the Premier League is a very good league to improve, because it's tough, it's intense, and especially for young players, it's the perfect environment to adapt. And in the end, they want to play for Brighton, and we want that they play for Brighton. So I think when they improve in the environment or in the league where we are also playing, it's always very helpful. So that's why I'm not thinking about making the other teams better. It's more about what is the best for the player.
All right, we've heard from two Premier League managers already this hour. Coming up, we'll get the thoughts of Newcastle head coach Eddie Howe. Plus, we'll have the latest on Marcus Rashford's future.